Hello everybody, it's Zen here with Speakeasy G. I'm glad you could join me today as we're going to be going over one-shotting all Season 2 bosses with the Upheaval Barbarian. I find that this Barbarian build is really fun to use. The specific weapon that we're going to be using is called the Hellhammer. And after showcasing the one-shots, basically I'm going to go over the build itself and generally how we procced overpower and how it all comes together, so stick around for that at the end. But of course, without further ado, let's get right into it. Alrighty, and there it is. All those bosses are officially dead. Now I do want to go into it and kind of look exactly to see how the Barbarian comes together. So I thought we start off with the skill tree. So let's go ahead and start off here. Our basic skill is Bash. Now you're gonna get Bash. You're gonna go to Enhanced Bash and Combat Bash. We can see them under the modifiers here. So Bash, basically the special thing about it is specifically this Combat Bash. After you critically strike 4 times with Bash with a two-handed weapon, your next core or weapon mastery skill will overpower. So that means this is one of the ways that we're going to be able to get a guaranteed overpower hit. Bash is also a basic skill, so we're going to be able to generate Fury with it. Now we're going to go down here, our Upheaval build. Our Upheaval skills. So basically, Upheaval, you want to put all the points that you can in it. Go to Enhanced and then Furious. Dealing direct damage to an enemy with a skill that is not Upheaval causes your next cast of Upheaval to deal 12% increased damage, stacking up to 6 times. So basically, if it takes you 6 hits of Bash to go ahead and proc that overpower, and this is obviously if you're using it that way, then you're going to be dealing pretty much increased damage, period. So Upheaval, that is our main skill. I have item contribution 14. 4 of those come from the Shaco, and the other ones come from the hammer itself. As we can look at here, 4 ranks of Upheaval. Our gloves, 4 ranks of Upheaval as well. And then the abilities, the points that we put into it. So now let's go on to the defensive skills. So as I mentioned, or might have mentioned, this is a triple shout build. So what we have is Rallying Cry, Challenging Shout, and War Cry. Rallying Cry basically allows us to generate Fury and gives us 20% additional resource generation. That's one of the modifiers. It also makes you unstoppable, increases your movement speed, resource generation. So Rallying Cry is very, very nice to have. Challenging Shout, taunt nearby enemies and gain 48% reduction for 7.43 seconds. So you do get, basically a damage reduction just by having the shout up. And then the modifiers: enhance Challenging Shout. While Challenging Shout is active, gain 20% bonus maximum life. And then while Challenging Shout is active, you gain 3 Fury each time you take damage. So even if you're in a scene where there's a lot of people or a lot of monsters hitting you, you're going to be generating fury. So we're generating fury from this. We're generating fury from this. Let's look at Warcry. So you bellow Almighty Warcry, increasing your damage dealt by 21% for 7.4 seconds, and nearby allies for 3.7. So Warcry also gives us berserking for 4 seconds, and if at least 6 enemies are nearby when you cast a Warcry, your damage bonus is increased by an additional 10%, right? So Warcry you want when you pop it, generally speaking, you're probably going to pop all 3 at the same time, but you also want to wait to get into the crowd of the enemies if that's the situation to maximize the effect of this. So berserking is also another way that we increase our damage, because we want to make sure on the affixes of the items, some of them have increased damage while berserking. So let's look at some of the passives. I think I passed one. Yeah, here we go. Imposing Presence, you gain an additional 18% maximum life. You put all 3 points into that. Damage reduction against elites is increased by 4%. So it's just a damage mitigation. But really this maximum life is to help us increase the amount of overpower that we are stacking. Then we have here movement speed is increased by 12%. I think movement is very key to survival in this game, pretty much most ARPGs, but it is specifically important in this game with all the trash mobs really spewing out, you know, pools of cheese and fire, so you want to make sure you're on the move. Booming Voice, your shout skill effective durations are increased by 24%, means you get more duration on your shouts. Raid Leader, your shouts also heal allies for 3% of their maximum life per second. This also heals you, so you want to have that. And your shout skills cause enemies to deal 12% less damage for 5 seconds. This is God Royale, so we put 3 points into all of those. Then we have Aggressive Resistance, gain 12% damage reduction while berserking. So while our berserking is up, we're going to get even more damage reduction. And then Prolific Fury, while berserking, fury generation is increased by 18%. So we have fury generation galore with all the shouts and the berserking state. We have Pit Fighter, you deal 9% increased damage to close enemies and gain 6% distant damage reduction. So this is just for those close enemies because we are melee. And Upheaval, even though it's kind of like a sweeping ball of fire or a sweeping gush of fire, pretty much we're going to be in the close range for most enemies. Then we have Thick Skin. Each time you take direct damage, you gain 0.4% maximum life, or 68 in my case, as Fortify. So this pretty much stacks our Fortify. While you have Fortify, for over 50% of your maximum life, you deal 12% increased damage. This is the counter offensive. Since we are going to be building a lot of Fortify, this just goes hand in hand, allowing us to deal and dish out more damage. Now for our ultimate, we are going to be using Wrath of the Berserker. So let's read it. Basically, you explode into rage, knocking back surrounding enemies and gaining berserking and unstoppable for 5 seconds. For the next 10 seconds, dealing direct damage with basic skills grants berserking for 5 seconds. So while you're doing this, you can also use your basic skills to extend the berserking, which is one of the things that are going to help us create a lot of damage. Then we have Prime Wrath of the Berserker. While Wrath of the Berserker is active, gain 20% increased movement speed and increased fury generation. While Wrath of the Berserker is active, every 50 fury you spend increases berserking damage done by 25% up to 100%. So this ultimate skill is very powerful. It's going to increase our damage, and when you do a triple shout pop and then you hit your overpower without this, you're going to notice a difference. It's still a lot. You're going to be hitting a lot, but when you pop this Wrath of the Berserker, it's really going to increase the amount of damage that you're going to be dishing out. Then we have Wallop. Your skills using bludgeoning weapons deal 15% increased damage if the enemy is stunned or vulnerable. And your overpower deal 45% multiplicative increased damage when using two-handed weapons, which is the bludgeon that we have. And then of course for our key passive is Unbridled Rage. So core skills deal 135% multiplicative increased damage, but cost 100% more fury. This is both things that we do want, because one, we're going to be increasing the amount of damage that we do, and two, we actually want to be spending more fury for this particular build. It's going to help us proc some overpowers, and I'll explain how that is in just a sec. Now on to our Paragon boards. So let's start here. Basically, we start off with the normal node, and we're going to make our way here and put in our Crusher. So basically, we're dealing more damage with maces. Mace, or two-handed mace, is going to be our primary weapon, as it also should be your two secondaries. Basically, the reason why we want the maces is because they have an implicit affix of overpowered damage. And with this, we're going to get increased damage with maces that we're already using, so it's a no-brainer. Now, for every 5 strength purchase within the range, you deal 5.3 increased damage while wielding a mace. So we want to make sure that you're maximizing on the strength. Here, while wielding a mace, you also deal 30% multiplicative increase overpowered damage. So it is important that you get these glyphs to level 15 as soon as possible. That's when you're going to see the biggest jump in damage, as well as you level them up as well. But basically, if you get this one, you're going to be dealing more overpowered damage. So you want to make sure you're rushing towards that. The second board that we put up is this one. It is the Bone Crusher board. Excuse me, Bone Breaker. So we're going to make our way over here. Put the Marshal. And essentially, after casting a shout skill, the active cooldown for every other shout skill is reduced by 1.2 seconds. So we have 3 shouts. If I cast the first one and then the second one, the first one is going to go down. And then once I hit the third one, the first 2 are also going to go down by 1.2 seconds. That's the additional bonus. But the primary one is 125% bonus to all magic nodes, which these are the magic nodes. So we get more dex, more damage reduction while healthy, and healthy is, I believe, over 85% of your life. But on this board, this is very important too, so don't go any further until you get this Bone Breaker. This is one of the other ways that we're going to be guaranteeing our overpower procs. Every 12 seconds, your next skill is guaranteed to overpower. Now notice how it says your next skill. So this little image is going to pop up above your skill bar here. It's going to be in here. Actually, it's right there. Your next attack will overpower, but it says attack, or on the node it says skill. So that means that if I hit this dummy with the bash, it's going to overpower, and it critically overpowered. So 445,000 there just from that. Okay, so make sure you get this. This is going to be another source of overpower, but understand that if you have that up there and you use your basic, your overpower is going to go towards your basic, which at the lower levels and a lot of the normal monsters, it should be enough with our basic to annihilate them, but you want to use it for your upheaval. So, you know, basically like this. No. So that was a straight overpower shot of 7 million. But alright, so let's make our way to here, our other board. And this board is the Blood Rage board. Now, killing a bleeding enemy has a 10% chance to grant berserking for 5 seconds. Your damage is increased by 25% of your damage while berserking bonus. So our current bonus is 60%. So while we're not using it for the bleeding, we're still getting the bonuses. So, you know, we'll take what we get. And then for the glyph, Ire, 73.9 damage while berserking. Basically, every 5 strength purchase within the range, you deal 5.3 increased damage while berserking. And then if you get the additional bonus while berserking, you take 10% reduced damage from elites. We currently have 70 out of the 40. I don't think it's possible to maximize this anymore. But yeah, so it's quite a lot and it's very good. Let's move on to our next board here. It is the Carnage board. While berserking, critical strikes increase your attack speed by 2%. There's our additive and up to 16% additive for 6 seconds. And basically this works hand in hand with our bash because we're already going to be looking to get critical strikes with our bash. So it's going to let us get to that critical strike much faster. So right now, if you look, my bash has the 4 amounts and it says bash critical strikes 4, and I need 4. So that means that I'm going to be using that. And when I do, it's going to pretty much overpower the attack. Let's go to the next one. Blood Rage. Killing. No, wait, this is the wrong word. I'm sorry. It's Decimator. So each time you make an enemy vulnerable, your damage is increased by 10% for 5 seconds. Overpowering a vulnerable enemy grants an additional 10% multiplicative bonus for 5 seconds. Then we have our glyph, Dominate. And for Dominate, for every 5 willpower purchased within the range, you deal 39.6 increased overpower damage. Mind you, all the glyphs that I'm showing right now are at level 21. That's why the numbers are so high. But basically, if you look at the green number above, 427% overpower damage increase. And then the additional bonus, which is another great way of overpowering, pretty much guarantees that you overpower before you even get to the fight, is after not overpowering for 30 seconds, your next attack will overpower. Again, attack, not upheaval, not your core. So even if you have this available and you use bash, it's going to be used on bash. So we can see it on here as well. Your next attack will overpower, and that is the same glyph right there. That's from that. Okay, now I did miss this one, so let's go over it real quick. This is the glyph socket, and it's called Might. Now, it grants 125% bonus to all magic nodes, which would be these. But then the bonus gives us, you deal 8% multiplicative increased damage while wielding two-handed weapons. So our damage increases just because we're holding the bludgeoning weapon. It has to be two-handed though. Alrighty. Okay, so now let's go ahead and go over our vampiric powers. So these are the powers for season 2. The most important one here is going to be Blood Boil. Now, if we read it, it says when your core skills overpower an enemy, you spawn 3 volatile orb drops. That's not really that important. Collecting a volatile blood drop causes it to explode, dealing damage. But the real thing that we want is the secondary thing that we're going to get here, which is every 20 seconds, your next skill is guaranteed to overpower. So as you can see down here, your next attack will overpower and it has the icon for the Blood Boil. So this is yet another way that we're going to guarantee overpowers. Our second power here is Prey on the Weak. You deal 16% multiplicative increased damage to vulnerable enemies. Enemies are vulnerable while affected by a vampiric curse from your other vampiric powers. So I want to demonstrate what that looks like, because we're not really causing enemies to be vulnerable by any other means. However, when you use this, the metamorphosis, you turn into a bat and you pretty much fly. What this does for you is that whenever you do evade into a cloud of bats, you become unstoppable for 4 seconds, and enemies along your path take damage and are inflicted with vampiric curse. If we read it here, enemies are vulnerable while affected by the vampiric curse. So the way that we're going to make enemy vulnerables is using our metamorphosis evade. And look at that. They're glowing purple. That means they are vulnerable right now. And you can also see the screaming skull right above them. So that's one of the ways we're going to make them vulnerable, which is why some skill says you do increase damage to vulnerable enemies. But this is yet another way that you can create more damage for maybe like a pack of mobs. Also, this vampiric power, when you evade, can also proc the hemomancy effect. So let's go over that. Your attacks deal 80% of your maximum life as physical damage to nearby enemies. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds, and you also are going to heal 1% of your maximum life for each enemy damaged this way. So hemomancy is actually extremely powerful, and it actually procs when you do a lot of things. I've gotten on my horse and it's procced. I do basic skills, it procs. I've healed and it procs. In invading, it procs as well. So when we invade, let me see if it procs here. I don't know if it did or not, or if it's gonna do it on this. But basically you see like a gush of blood coming out from the enemies and they just take damage or maybe even die, and you heal from that. So this hemomancy power is extremely powerful. You also want to have it, and it helps deal with those little mobs of monsters. You can just evade right through them or attack one of them and pretty much all of them die. And then since we have so much life, this basically deals 80% of my life, and I'm at 18,000, so it's going to deal a lot of damage. And then for our last power, we have Sanguine Brace. When you kill an enemy, fortify for 6% of your base life. While you have more fortify than half of your maximum life, you gain 8% critical strike chance. And this increases, obviously, all of these increase as you level it up. So if you have fortify of more than half of your life, you're going to get even more critical strike chance. So when you're inside those mobs, killing a bunch of things, you're probably going to have an increased critical strike chance just because of this. So let's go ahead and go over what our armor looks like. Essentially, I do have the Shako, the Harlequin Crest. I did get that drop. I do have a video on that as well if you want to check that out. For our chest, we are looking to get damage reduction from close, damage reduction while berserking, and if possible armor and maximum life. And then for our gloves, we do want attack speed, critical strike chance, and ranks to upheaval. So you want to make sure you're getting as many ranks of upheaval from this with the expectant. So attacking enemies with a basic skill increases the damage of your next core skill cast by 9%. Maximum is 10. I used it on another pair, so the next best one was basically a 9% that I have here. I also have 63 strength on it. I wasn't able to get the other stat that I was looking for, but hey, 63 strength is adding to our damage. By the way, the chest armor is going to use might, basic skill, grant 20% damage reduction for 5 seconds. So you can just, if you don't need any fury, it doesn't matter, just go ahead and whack somebody with your bash, and you know that for the next 5 seconds you'll have damage reduction. Then we're going to use Tybalt's Will for pretty much damage output. Even though this is a pant, you know, we have 18% damage, 4 potion capacity, 12 maximum resource, and damage reduction from close, so that's really nice. But basically we're looking for the unique effect, and that is dealing 22% increased damage while unstoppable for 4 seconds. When you become unstoppable, you also gain 50 of your primary resource. So our shouts make us unstoppable. Our berserk, Wrath of the Berserk, also makes us unstoppable. So all these things are going to contribute to getting more damage. Then I personally go with a movement speed and a triple resistance. Now for season 2, resistances are very important. However, I don't have them all maxed out. I have lightning and cold, but actually with this build you are killing the bosses so quick that I found that resistances are really kind of mute. They're mute. So I still stack them because obviously I don't want to get one shot here or there, or you know, I don't want to be constantly taking damage from everything. But you know, you can pick whatever it is that you don't have. And then of course our primary weapon, Hellhammer, gives us those ranks to upheaval, damage reduction from burning enemies. So if anything survives or blast, and then they're burning, they're going to continue to take damage, but also they're going to do less damage to us. Then we have damage to burning enemies and damage with two-handed bludgeoning weapons. So overall this is a very good piece. And then of course the upheaval ignites the ground burning enemies for an additional 6,374 over 4 seconds. As I mentioned, the other 2 one-handed weapons are going to be maces. You want all stats, strength, overpowered, damage, and damage while berserking. So I wasn't able to get it in some of these, but I was able to get it 36 to all stats, 74 strength, 81 overpower, and the same thing here. So that's good. And then what we want for our other weapon, is an axe. Damage to healthy enemy is the implicit. And we have 72 to all stats, 150 strength, and overpowered damage. The only way I could improve this is if I got a damaged while berserking instead of the injured enemies. But, you know, we take what we can find. So yeah, that's the way. These are the ways right here that you're really going to be stacking a lot of strength. And as you can see here, we have 1,239 strength, which is pretty awesome. Then for our necklace, we have Banchelor's Talisman, 3.9 critical strike chance, 54 overpower damage, 18.5 resource generation, which is great, and 2 ranks of all core skills. So that also adds to our upheaval count. And then the unique, after you spend 300 your primary resource, your next core skill is guaranteed to overpower your critical strikes that overpower deal 112% increased damage. So this is this counter right here. So every single time that I do an upheaval, it adds 60. Excuse me, it adds 80. So right now, since I already did one earlier, I'm at 160. The next one will be 240. And then 300. And that is what's going to guarantee an overpower as well. And that overpower is also going to do more damage, so that's great. Then we have a ring, critical strike chance, damage while berserking, maximum life and resource generation. This is exactly what you want. On my other ring, I do have pretty much the same exact stats, but since the new rings came out, this was much better. Basically, after spending 100 fury within 3 seconds, it guarantees critical strikes from Hammer of the Ancients, the Hoda, Upheaval, or Death Blow. So this is a no-brainer. Since I'm doing Upheaval, this automatically allows me to do critical strikes and basically allows me to go into a boss and prime it and prepare it. So this one is indicated by this, right? So you see the malignant little icon there, that comes from that, but you have to do it within 3 seconds. If not, it won't proc there. So basically that is the armor itself. Let me go ahead and show you how I normally do it before I go into a boss or any dungeon really. So let's assume that I didn't have anything there. So what I normally do is I go ahead and hit until I get 4. Look at that, that was pretty quick. I already have my 300. And so if we go ahead and pop just an overpower cast without any shouts, you're gonna see 35 million. I mean, I didn't pop any shouts yet. Let's go ahead and build it back up. Our stacks. And let's see what happens when we pop just the shouts. 112 million right there. And then 109 million. Basically, and that's basically for the normal, I believe, or the single, excuse me. Let's see if the normal changes anything. Normal should be easier. Let's go for a boss. Boss, you're not going to hit as hard, but you're still hitting pretty hard. Let's go ahead and get that in here. There we go. So let's see how much we hit without our shouts. 9 million. 7 million. And these are just guaranteed overpowers. 10 million. These are just overpowers. Let's do our shouts. That was a normal critical. 13 million. 53 million. And so on. So you get the picture basically. Yeah. So basically this damage that you're doing comes from overpower that critically strikes. So when you see that orange number, it means that you overpowered, but it also critically struck. So your overpower has a chance to critically strike. Let's go ahead and look at it. If we look at critical strike chance, we're at 36.8%. Mine was higher, but I had to remove their other ring in place of this new ring. So we're down to 36.8%, but that's still over a third of a critical strike. Every 3 hits is at least 1. And so that's going to enhance our overpower. So you also want to be increasing your critical strike. So there you have it, guys. This is the Barbarian Upheaval for Season 2. That's the entirety of the build itself. Down below, I'm going to be linking the macro guide for both the leveling and the endgame guide for this. It's pretty much the same. You can make it your own in little bits and pieces, but if you stray too much, you will suffer in power. Other than that, you know, this is the video itself. If you guys liked what you heard and you want to hear more, go ahead and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave me a comment. But other than that, take care of yourselves and you have a great rest of your day. Bye bye now.